Welcome to Learn TypeScript for Angular Development Section 2 Custom Components with TypeScript. In the previous section, we have learned TypeScript language fundamentals, and we started working with Angular framework. In this section, we'll be working with components, and at the beginning, we'll create our first Angular component. Then we'll go through component composition, we'll discover lifecycle hooks, and at the end, we'll be working with events. So in this video, we are going to focus on Angular component. We'll create Angular component via Angular CLI, and we'll explore templates. Angular component. Angular components are simply classes that are designed as a component with the help of component decorator. Each component has defined a template and styles, which can communicate with the code in the component class. So let's go to see closer how our main app component is defined. In the previous section, we have created our first Angular application using Angular CLI. So what it does, it creates the basic app component in the source folder. As you can see, there is an app component.js. At the top of this file, we will see that to create a component, we have to import a component member from an Angular core. Then, as you can see, is a component decorator. To make a component decorator, just add an @ symbol like @component. That component is a reference to the above import statement, and this class makes a component. What is really important that inside the component decorator, you have a couple of configuration properties to define a component. So there is a selector with the name uproot. So if we go to the index.html, we'll find our uproot in the body. So there is our app component start. There is also a template URL which points to the external file, HTML file. There's also styles URLs, which also points to the styles, to the external CSS file. And there is also a bunch of properties that you can define based on your component needs. And all those things you can find on Angular IO API components. Below component decorator, we have a component class where we can define properties and method, and what is really important that whatever you define in a class can be accessible in templates, like events, data binding techniques, and so on. Okay, so we know how our basic app component looks like, but where this component is exported and placed. In the source folder, we can also find app_module.ts right here. So let's look closer into this file. Every Angular app has at least one module, the root module. And as we can see in app module, app component is imported and added into ng module decorator in declarations. In declarations, we put all components directive pipes. In imports, we put all modules like browser module or some third-party modules or libraries. In providers, we put all services. And in Bootstrap, the main components to be bootstrapped in main TS file, normally one only. Then our root module is imported in main.ts. So let's go there. As you can see, we imported app module. But if you want to deeply understanding the whole process of how components are instantiated and works under the hood, I really recommend you to check the Angular IO docs. Now let's go to the command line to create our first Angular component. Of course, we can use ng Angular CLI, so type ng g, which is a shorthand for generate component, and for example header. Press enter, and it generates a couple of files. So let's go back to the code editor, and as we can see, it creates a new directory, header directory, in which we can find a header component, specs for testing, header component.html, which is a template, and CSS for styles. Also, Angular CLI did for us additional things like added our component to the app module.ts, so we can go there. And as you can see, it's imported our header component and added to the declarations. So because it's added to the declaration, we can use our component in our application. So we can go to the header component class decorator. We can copy the selector and paste in app component.html at the very bottom and create a tag app header. And you can save that and run ng-serve, which will build our application and serve on port 4200. So we can refresh, and as you can see at the bottom there is a text header works. Cool. So we created our first Angular component. Now we know the basics of the Angular components, so let's look into the Angular templates. I've already mentioned how we can point into the external HTML file, but there is also a possibility to create an inline template. So we can go to the header component.ts and let's remove template URL and create a template property with a string p tag and title, for example, inline header, and save that. Go to the browser, and as you can see, there is a text inline header. But to make our application clean, I highly recommend you to put all your templates in the external file. So let's change that. Okay, so how we can display a dynamic data in our template? Displaying dynamic data is called interpolation, and data is usually defined in the component class. So we can go to the app component.ts, and as you can see, there is a field title with a string app. And if we go to the app component.html, we will see that it's used at the top, and it's wrapped by double curly braces. So we can go to the header component.ts and let's create a field called header title, which is equal to header title. And if we go to our header component.html, we can wrap with double curly braces header title and press enter. Save that, go to our browser, and there is a header title. So it's pretty easy. What if we want to create a button and we want to disable it via interpolation from our class? We use interpolation to define the value as long as the value we are defining is a string. So in that case, it will not work. But we can use a property binding, which allow us to define element attribute values from the component class. To do that, we can use a square brackets. First, I will create a class field called disabled button, which is equal to false. In our header component.html, let's create a button, disabled button, and we can set our disabled attribute into square and is equal to disabled button. Save that. It doesn't work because we have to wrap our disabled button field. Save that. Go to the browser, and as you can see, it works. And if we change disabled button to true, still doesn't work. Why? Repeat. We'll say first, let's create a button with a title button disabled, and then let's create a disabled which is equal to disabled button and save that. Go to the browser, and if we change a field disabled button to true, and it works. Also, what you should know about property binding is that it's working in a one way. So the flow comes from our class into template, not in reverse and not in two ways.